Imagine you are a ruler who has just proclaimed the birth of a new, independent state. In your hands lie the army, the treasury, the courts, and the authority to decide what will henceforth be considered truth and what heresy. But on your table, taxes collected from your own cities pour forth, thousands of coins that circulate in your land, and on each of them, on the reverse side of your greatness, are not your prayers, but the symbols of the very empire you supposedly defeated. This is not merely silver. It's proof that your independence is merely a change of signage. And if the people realize that the enemy's language is actually the language of the state treasury, your myth of a liberator will crumble. One decree from you, and the mint adopts a new standard. The old masters disappear, and calligraphy transforms into a meaningless pattern that in just a generation, no one will be able to decipher. What will you choose? To acknowledge that you are merely a successor of a vast, unified system, or to erase the memory of an entire continent so that only your heroic victory over an imagined yoke remains in textbooks? Now let's see how this played out in real history. Take any coin from your pocket. An eagle. Denomination. Inscription in Russian. Clear. Familiar. This is what the currency of a state looks like, one that knows who it is. Now, a different coin. It lies in the State Museum, in the section Currency of Rus. The plaque reads, Denga, Moscow, 14th century, Russian state. Everything is official. Everything is according to science. You take a magnifying glass, look at the obverse. There's a horseman with a spear. A typical Moscow minting. Recognizable. Ornate. This is exactly how a coin from the Russian state looks. You are flipping it over. There is not a single Cyrillic letter on the reverse. Not one. The entire text is in Arabic. Completely. Elegant letters that none of the visitors in this hall can read, and which are not translated on the museum plaque. It simply states, Money of the 14th century. What is specifically written on the coin itself is not specified. This is the official Russian coin. Now approach this situation like an engineer. What do you see? The state exists in the 14th century. It has a mint, which means there are state finances, a budget, and a treasury. There are skilled artisans. There is a bureaucracy that approves standards. The state knows what it is doing. The state functions. And this state issues an official monetary document, on one side of which its name is written, and on the other side, text in a language that official history refers to as the language of the oppressors. Not once, not by mistake, systematically, generation after generation, officially. If a similar situation were to arise in a modern context, imagine a country that prints banknotes with inscriptions in the language of the state from which it has just gained independence. It would immediately become a scandal. Political, public, debated. In the 14th century, silence. Right now, open a search engine. Enter Coins of Dmitry Donskoy Numismatics. Go to any numismatic catalog, either the website of the State Historical Museum or a specialized collectors forum. Find an image of the coin from both sides. Note, on most displays and publications, the obverse with the horseman is shown prominently in the foreground, while the reverse is displayed smaller, to the side, as a secondary image that can easily be overlooked. Find this second picture. Take a closer look. You expected to see something familiar there. Letters that would be recognizable to anyone who grew up with Cyrillic. A date, the name of a city, a name. Anything, as long as it's readable. It's not that there. I am not going to shout, "You've been deceived," and draw red arrows. I simply suggest keeping this image in mind while we count and compare. Because the most interesting part here is not what is actually written, and not even what is silently omitted in museum texts. The most interesting thing is who commissioned this to be written. Who made the decision to approve this particular stamp? Who sat in the meeting and said, "Yes, this is how the official currency unit of our state will look. One side in Russian, the other side like this." He was a government official, a living person with a name and a position. Note one more thing. On display in the museum, the coin is placed with the obverse facing up. There is a beautiful horseman with a spear, a sensible decision, to show the attractive side. If there's no magnifying glass nearby, and if you don't know exactly what you're looking for, you will leave the hall without having seen anything. A random arrangement, probably. And for now, remember this. It is not the only coin. It is not the whim of a single official. It is an era, lasting a century and a half. There is one more detail that the museum guides do not mention. Look at how the numismatic section is organized. The coins are arranged thematically. Russian money, foreign coins, coins of the Golden Horde. These are 3 different display cases, 3 different sections. The logic is simple. Here are ours, here are the others. Bilingual coins of Russian princes are in the section Russian money. Coins of the Golden Horde with identical Arabic text are in the section Coins of the Golden Horde. Between the display cases, there's about 3 meters of space. If you approach one, look at it, step back, and then approach the other, visual comparison doesn't work. The brain can't retain details at that distance. Random layout of the hall, probably. Here, it is essential to pause and delve into the mechanics. Without an understanding of the coin production technology, the entire subsequent picture will be blurred. A coin is not an accessory or an item of everyday use crafted to the taste of the customer. A coin is a state document with a metallic foundation, a legal act that exists in thousands of copies. Each coin declares, "This state exists. Here is its authority. Here is its name. Here is what it considers important to place on an official document." The text on a coin is not a design element. It is an official statement on behalf of the entity that issued it. There are no random inscriptions on coins. Coins are not drawn by hand for each specimen. They are minted using a die, a steel matrix in which a master engraver carves a mirror image of the future coin. A single die was expensive. Its creation took several days of meticulous handwork. The engraver worked with special steel drills and chisels, carving the relief in hardened steel with precision down to fractions of a millimeter. A good die could withstand between 3,000 to 5,000 strikes. After that, it would be replaced. But each new die was again carved by hand. Again, several days of work were spent. Again, they paid the master. Again, the sample was approved. To change the inscription means to create a new stamp with different text. This requires making a decision at the level of government administration, discussing it, approving it, compensating the craftsman, waiting for it to be ready. Only then can the new minting be initiated. Not it just happened, not tradition drew itself. A decision, a conscious one. Now consider what lies behind this decision. The Moscow Mint of the 14th century is not a separate building with a sign. It is a workshop operating within the Kremlin under the direct supervision of the prince's treasurer. Each new coin release is an event. Before the first die strikes the first blank, the coin sample is displayed. It is approved. A test piece is weighed. It is recorded in the treasury book. Not a single person made this decision. A chain. And in this chain, someone must have been able to read Arabic. Not to explain it to the people, no one asked the people, but to understand for oneself whether the text proposed by the master engraver was correct and if it aligned with the intended meaning. Someone controlled the content. Someone knew the language well enough to accept or reject the proposed text. This person worked in the Moscow Kremlin in the 14th century. Open any academic numismatic reference on coins from the Principates of Russia in the 13th to 15th centuries. Look not at one ruler, but at several in succession. Dmitry Donskoy, his son Vasily I, his grandson Vasily II. 3 generations, 3 different individuals, different mints in different cities, different decades. Arabic text for everyone. This is not a personal whim of one king with exotic tastes. It is a standard, established successively by 3 generations of rulers. 3 different treasurers signed 3 different orders for the production of the stamp. 3 times the same choice. At first glance, this can be explained simply. They copied the Mongol patterns for trade. The market demanded a familiar format, and merchants needed to recognize the denominations. Rational economic logic. Trading pragmatism. But then, answer one question. On these coins, next to the Arabic text, is the name of a specific Russian prince. Not a Khan, not an ordinal governor. The name Dmitry, the name Vasily, an official state issue, a sovereign signature. And next to this sovereign signature is the official Arabic text chosen by a Moscow official. This is not a copy of someone else's coin. This is an authorized bilingual document. 2 languages, 1 languages, 1 document, 1 authority. Why does the Russian prince place his name alongside a foreign alphabet on a document that he calls an official expression of his power? There is another angle. Look at how the bilingual coin is structured from the perspective of text hierarchy. On the obverse is the name of the prince. On the reverse is the Arabic text. In medieval heraldry and coinage, there was a clear rule. The obverse and reverse are not equivalent sides. The obverse is the face of authority, the visage of the ruler or their emblem. The reverse represents the ideological foundation of that authority. On the Cyrillic coins of later issues, the reverse features an orthodox cross, or an inscription about the divinity of power. On bilingual coins, the reverse features Arabic text. This is not a decoration. It is the ideological foundation of power, recorded on the ideological side of the document. In Arabic. Ask yourself one question. What does this say about where the Moscow prince of the 14th century derived the legitimacy of his power from? There is no answer yet. It will appear later, when we look at what exactly is written there. But first, we need to understand the scale. Because one person with unusual taste is a joke. However, when every mint in an area the size of a continent makes the same choice, that's already a system. But first, one specific object, which can be found right now. Open the numismatic catalog of the State Historical Museum. It is available online for public access, or any academic reference titled Coins of the Moscow Principality. Look for the coins of Dmitry Donskoy. They are marked as DD in the catalogs. The description will say, obverse, a horseman with a spear, inscription in Cyrillic, and reverse, Arabic inscription. Now take a look at the reverse translation column. In most catalogs, it is blank. Not translation unknown, just blank. The coin is described, dated, attributed, but what is written on it is not included in the item description. This is a small detail, but think about it. The museum describes the coin. A professional numismatist worked with this item. If the text were unreadable or lost, he would have written legend unreadable or imitation. But it's not an imitation. There is a full Arabic text, readable, with known writing rules. It's simply that the translation hasn't been entered into the card. The reason is not explained. This is not an accusation, it's an observation. Just like the face-up display in a showcase. Just like the 3 meters between 2 showcases in the same room. Small details that come together to form a pattern. Let's step away from a specific coin and take a look at the bigger picture. Coins with Arabic text are not collectible rarities that appear once every 50 years with great luck. They are something that is densely buried in the ground all over Russia. Treasures of Novgorod, treasures of Pskov, Ryazan, Tver, Nizhny Novgorod, Moscow, Arkhangelsk region, the Volga region, Yaroslavl. Not just a few, thousands of coins in hundreds of hoards scattered throughout central Russia. Remember this number. In Russian numismatic hoards from the 13th to 15th centuries, coins with Arabic text make up 60 to 90% of all found silver mass. They do not exist among others. They are not found alongside Cyrillic coins. They prevail by a staggering majority. These are the only money that really circulated. Let's translate this figure into reality. 9 coins out of 10 in a merchant's purse have Arabic inscriptions. This is not an exotic addition. This is the main currency mass. Find the academic map of numismatic treasures from the 13th to 15th centuries in the territory of Russia. Look at the geography. These are not the southern outskirts or border areas. This is Central Rus, Vladimir Land, the Principality of Moscow, Tver, Ryazan, the very heart. Officially, it is explained this way. Economic dependence, The horde minted coins, and Rus accepted them. Nothing out of the ordinary. Logical. However, there is one detail in this version that does not add up. Absolute silence. For a century and a half. People of that era knew how and loved to complain about inconveniences. The Tatar envoys behave haughtily, this is reported. The necessity to pay tribute is written about with bitterness and specific amounts. Dozens of birch bark letters have been preserved from Novgorod, Pskov, and Smolensk. Personal notes from merchants and townspeople, uncensored, without any official tone. They write about who owes whom, for what goods payment has not been made, and when it will be returned. Money is mentioned constantly. And in no document is there a word about the coins with incomprehensible letters causing difficulties. Not a single mention of needing to call someone to find out their denomination. Not one. Either the money was understood, or no one perceived Arabic as a foreign language. These are two very different conclusions, and both undermine the official narrative. But before we move on to Kulikovo, pause for a moment, because there is a question looming over the whole picture. A question that official history sidesteps so deftly that it is almost unnoticed. Where did these coins actually come from? Look at the timeline. Take any academic textbook on the history of Russian monetary circulation, whether at the library or online on the Goznak website where it is published openly. It will say the following. From the 12th to the end of the 14th century, there was no minting of coins in Rus. At all. This period is referred to by numismatists with a special term, the coinless period. An official term, academic. The historian of numismatics E. G. Spassky directly calls it in his book The Russian Monetary System, a very strange, unusual phenomenon in the history of Russian monetary circulation. 200 years. By some estimates, over 300. Not a single coin of its own. Remember this number. 300 years. Now let's see what happens next. Coin minting resumes in the second half of the 14th century. The first coins are bilingual. The obverse features the name of a Russian prince in Cyrillic. The reverse has Arabic text. Right away, from the very first issue. Not started with simple Cyrillic coins, then gradually added an Arabic element. Not first copied the Mongol samples, then developed their own standard. The first coin is already a professional bilingual minting, with correctly joined letters, with ornamental separators, with calligraphy that aligns with the mints 800 kilometers away. 3 centuries of silence, and suddenly a ready-made system. Official explanation? Trade connections have been restored. The Mongol model was used as a template, and apparently the craftsmen were brought in. That makes sense. But then answer me one question. If the craftsmen were brought from the horde, it means that the masters from the oppressor state came to work in the Kremlin of the subjugated state. They lived there, trained apprentices, and passed on their craft. Yet no chronicler deemed it necessary to record this as an event. There is no record stating that foreigners were hired, paid, and taught. Nothing at all. 300 years without a coin, and silence about how the tradition returned. But there is one more layer, deeper than the coins. You can't hide it in a vault. You can't place it heads down. It lives in the language. Take the word you use to refer to money every day. Denji. Open an etymological dictionary, Vasmer's dictionary, Krylov's dictionary, Shansky's dictionary. 3 different authors, 3 different editions. All 3 say the same thing. Dengi is borrowed from Turkic. Tenja, silver coin. The first written record in Russian documents, 1361. It was precisely then that minting was resumed. The Russian language of the 14th century named its coin with a Turkic word. It did not invent its own. It took something ready-made. Now move further. Treasury is the state treasury, a word without which it is impossible to describe state finances. Origin: Turkic, tracing back to the Arabic khazina, treasure. The first fixation in Russian monuments, the year 1389. The same period. Altin is a monetary unit of account worth 6 denga. It is a Turkic word. It first appeared in Russian documents in the Treaty of 1375. Who signed it? Dmitry Donskoy, the very one who, 5 years later, would face the battle on Kulikovo Field. Customs is the place where duties are collected, derived from the Turkic word tamga, seal, stamp. The same word, pronounced differently, gave rise to dengu. Money and customs are cognate words, one system. Consider what this means. The state treasury, currency unit, accounting denomination, customs duties. 4 basic concepts without which no state financial system can function. All 4 are represented in the Russian language of the 14th century by words from the same linguistic space. This is not a few borrowed words. It is the terminology of an entire system, the terminology of public finance in its entirety. Nations borrow names for items that come from outside, not for the organization of their own state. Treasury is not something imported like a spice or fabric. It is an organ of power. There is no word for it in their own language. Only if the organ itself arrived fully formed, along with the language in which it operated. In the 14th century, Rus did not have its own word for state treasury. There was no word for coin. There was no word for trade duty. This means one thing. At the moment when these concepts emerged in state usage, they originated from one system, not as borrowed from outsiders, but as normal administrative vocabulary of the working system, of which Rus was a part. Now add to this a detail that almost no one pays attention to. After the official liberation, after Ivan III broke away from the horde, adopted a new coat of arms, married a Paleologos, and declared Moscow the Third Rome, all these words remained. Denga remained denga, kazna remained kazna, tamozhnya remained tamozhnya. None of them were replaced by new Russian terms. Look at what Ivan III changed in that same era. The coat of arms changed. The marriage policy changed. The name of the capital changed. Right down to the architectural style of the Kremlin. He invited Italian architects and changed that too. And the words of public finances, I haven't touched a single one. This is not negligence. It is impossibility. The words were alive in active use. They were spoken by treasurers, merchants, and customs officials. To replace them would mean retraining everyone who works with money all at once. No one has done that, because these words were not foreign. So, this was the system's own language, not the language of conquerors, the working language of the administration in which Russia existed. And when in the year 1361 the word denga appeared on the first Russian coin, it was not an adoption from outsiders. It was an official affirmation of a term that had already existed in living monetary circulation, a term that everyone already knew. 300 years without minting. The first coin bears a name from Turkic origins, with Arabic text on the reverse, featuring calligraphy identical to that of other mints located several hundred kilometers away. The tradition has not been interrupted. It's just that coins were not minted for 3 centuries. And then it gets even more interesting. The year 1380, the Battle of Kulikovo. Dmitry Donskoy defeats Mamai's forces at Kulikovo Field, a national hero, a symbol of Russian resistance, a man whom the Orthodox Church canonizes as a saint. After this victory, he begins to mint his own Moscow coins, not the ones from the hoard, his own. Sovereign. The obverse bears his name in Cyrillic letters, Dmitri. On the reverse side is Arabic text. In numismatic science, such coins have a special designation, bilingual minting. This is the official term. The obverse features the Cyrillic name of the Grand Prince, while the reverse has an Arabic text selected by Moscow officials. Find in the numismatic catalog the series of bilingual coins of Dmitry Donskoy. They are available in the public domain. Look at the reverse side. Then find the coins of his son, Basil I, the same design, another name. Then his grandson, Basil II. 30 years have passed since the Battle of Kulikovo. 40, 50. The same Arabic text on official Moscow coins. 3 generations of victors. Let's address the technical side, because there is an important detail here. To create a bilingual coin, 2 stamps are needed, one in Cyrillic and one in Arabic script. The Arabic stamp is not simply copying someone else's specimen. The stamp is a mirror image. To carve it correctly, the craftsman must read the text. They need to understand how the letters connect in specific positions. Each letter in Arabic has different forms at the beginning, middle, and end of a word. They must know where one word ends and another begins. They should be able to reproduce this mirroring in metal. Add the specifics of working with the stamp. The cutter works with hardened steel. Mistakes cannot be corrected. The only option is to discard the stamp and start anew. Each letter is carved once and for all. An error in a letter means a loss of several days of work and material. This is a professional competency that requires 2 skills simultaneously: knowing the language and mastering the tool. Both skills are acquired through years of practice. Without special training, they are impossible to achieve. Calculate how many such craftsmen were there at the same time. Only in the mints known to us from sources: Moscow, Tver, Nizhny Novgorod, Ryazan, Yaroslavl, Pskov, Novgorod. 7 cities. Each mint operated continuously, not seasonally, and required at least 2 or 3 experienced engravers, 1 actively working, 1 learning, and 1 on standby in case of illness. That's no less than 20 people at the same time, 20 professionals who could carve Arabic text, simultaneously, across the entire territory. If this is a foreign language, where did they learn? Who taught them? How many years did the training take? Where was the school located? There is no answer to these questions in official historiography. It is simply stated, the masters knew how to do it. How they learned is not discussed. And note this, bilingual coins were minted not only in Moscow. Tver issued its own coins with Arabic text. Nizhny Novgorod, its own. Ryazan. Each principality's mint had its own engraver with the same professional expertise. It's not just one unique individual at the Moscow Mint. This is a professional environment spread across all cities. The tradition of bilingual minting lasted for another 100 years after the Battle of Kulikovo. Dmitry, Vasily I, Vasily II, Ivan III. 4 generations of rulers, whom textbooks refer to as liberators from the yoke, continued to officially place Arabic text alongside their names. That's not how you treat someone else's language. When a state frees itself from dependence, it immediately changes its symbolism. This is one of the first acts of the new power. This has been done by all liberated nations throughout history, from Rome to the 20th century. Look at a specific example from the same century. When the great Lithuanian prince Vytautas defeated the Tatar armies at the end of the 14th century, Lithuanian coins immediately adopted new symbolism. The victory was reflected in metal that same year. Polish kings did the same. A new victory meant a new coat of arms on the coin in the same year. Dmitry Donskoy, after the Battle of Kulikovo, not a single symbolic change. His son has none. His grandson has none. It is impossible to explain this through the narrative of liberation. If liberation is the symbolism, it changes. This is a reflex of power that has never faltered in world history. And now the following question arises. What exactly is written in these Arabic texts? Because these are not just words. This is a choice, a conscious choice from a multitude of possible formulas. And this choice explains a lot. Let's analyze the content. Until now, we have discussed the fact of the Arabic text and its scope. Now, we will address what is actually written in it. This changes the entire picture. On the coins of the hoard, the Arabic text serves a practical administrative purpose. The name of the Khan. May his reign be long. The minting location. The year in Hijri. A clear business record. The state document states, this is who mints, this is where, this is when. Everything is functional. On the bilingual coins of Russian princes, it is different. There is no name of a Khan there. There is no formula of the hoard's administration. There are religious texts. Formulas that correspond in meaning and character to what we saw in the previous video on the armor of Russian czars in the armory chamber. Find a numismatic guide on the coins of the Grand Duchy of Moscow. In several academic publications, there is a section where translations of Arabic legends from bilingual coins are published. There are not many such translations. They are scattered across specialized journals, and it is not customary to include them in publicly available exhibition descriptions. However, they do exist. Find at least one. Read what it says. This is not an administrative formula. It is a religious testament. A formula semantically close to what we saw engraved in gold on the visor of Alexei Mikhailovich's helmet, crafted by the Moscow master Nikita Davidov. The same semantic field, the same principle of selection from numerous possible texts. And choice is the key word. Look at how this is arranged. On the coins of the hoard, there is administrative text, the name of the Khan, and the minting location. On the bilingual Moscow coins, however, There is not the horde formula, but a religious text. This is not a copied horde inscription. It is a different text, intentionally different, selected by the Moscow official from a specific semantic field and placed alongside the name of the Orthodox prince on his official document. Now a parallel. We examined armor. On the helmet of Alexei Mikhailovich, the Shahada. On the mirror armor of the armory chamber, verses from the Quran. Moscow craftsman, 17th century. On the coins of the same state, just 2 or 3 centuries earlier, the same religious formulas, the same alphabet, the same principle of meaningful choice. Armor of Orthodox kings, coins of Orthodox princes. One language, one texts, one system. Now calculate the time gap. Coins with religious Arabic formulas are from the 14th to 15th centuries. Armor with the same formulas is from the 17th century. Between them, 200 to 300 years. For 200 to 300 years, the same texts, the same choice, the same location, on a state document next to the name of the ruler or on his personal battle equipment. 200 years of one system is not a trend. Trends last 20 to 30 years at most. 200 years is a tradition passed down from generation to generation within governmental structures. The official history says, this Eastern influence gradually faded away. All right, then explain why it hasn't faded away in 200 years. Why does the influence that was supposed to end with Dmitry Donskoy's victory in 1380 continue to be present on the personal armor of Alexei Mikhailovich in 1670? 290 years of influence after the source of that influence officially ceased to exist. This is not influence. This is a tradition of its own. The moment the Arabic text disappeared from coins does not coincide with a religious reform within the country or a change in tastes at court. It coincides with a specific political package of decisions made by one person, Ivan III. The end of the 15th century. The official break with the horde. The marriage to Sophia Paleologus, the niece of the last Byzantine emperor. The adoption of the double-headed eagle as the state emblem. The concept of Moscow as the Third Rome. All of this took place over a span of about 20 years. One political program. And at the very same 20 years, the Arabic text disappears from the coins. It doesn't gradually fade over 100 years. It happens precisely when everything else is changing. This is not inertia. Inertia is not synchronized with political decisions. This is a conscious decision within the overall program of restructuring state identity. The coat of arms has been changed. The marriage strategy has been changed. The concept of legitimacy has been changed. The text on the coins has been changed. Everything is packaged together. Look at the scale of this program. Ivan III, in about 20 years, changes everything that makes the state visible. The symbols of power, international alliances, the concept of origin, the monetary standard. This is not a reform in the narrow sense. It is a complete systemic change of identity. Among historians, there is no consensus on whose initiative it was. Some say it was Ivan's personal decision. Others point to the influence of Sophia Paleologus, who brought with her the court culture of Constantinople. Yet others argue it was the pressure from the nobility, which sought to distance itself from the Mongol past. Different explanations. One consequence: the Arabic text disappears from the coins. But here's a detail that is always overlooked in this regard. Ivan III died in 1505. The Arabic text on the coins during his reign truly began to degrade. We will discuss this in detail a bit later. However, the process was not fully completed, down to the last coin, during his reign or that of his son, Vasily III. The final point is the year 1535, the reform of Elena Glinskaya, a unified kopeck for the entire country. For the first time, one coin, one standard, one alphabet on both sides, only Cyrillic. Remember the date, 1535. Now, let's calculate. Historians date the official end of the Mongol-Tatar yoke to the year 1480, marked by the stand on the Ugra River, when Ivan III and Khan Akhmat parted ways without battle. This is the official date, the date of liberation. It is recorded in every school textbook. From 1480 to 1535, 55 years. 55 years after the official liberation, the state continued to mint coins with Arabic text, not out of inertia in one courtyard in one city, but throughout the entire country, until a special decree was issued that unified the entire monetary system. Only then did it disappear. Now take a look at who carried out this reform. Elena Glinskaya, regent during the minority of Ivan IV, the future Grozny. A woman who governed the state on behalf of a child. Of foreign origin, from a Lithuanian-Serbian lineage. It was she, not Ivan III, not Vasily III, who put the final nail in the coffin of the monetary system of the previous era. And she did this as part of a comprehensive financial reform. She not only removed the Arabic text, but also established a uniform weight of silver, a uniform denomination, and a uniform image. The kopeck features a rider with a spear, one design for the entire country. Ask the question, why did this task fall to the regent during the child's rule, rather than to the two previous sovereigns, Ivan III and Vasily III, who collectively ruled for almost 60 years? There is no official answer. In textbooks, this is described as economic necessity, curbing counterfeiting, standardization of weight. All of this is correct. But why did this necessity arise precisely at that time and not half a century earlier? Because half a century earlier, the old system still functioned. The masters who knew how to maintain it were still alive. There was still an environment in which bilingual minting was the norm. And as long as this environment existed, they left it alone. The year 1535 is the date when the old environment had thinned enough to allow for a replacement without resistance, quietly, through financial reform. 55 years from the official liberation to the last coin with Arabic text. This is not a tail end. This is an entire era. But coins are not the only official document with Arabic text. There is something more important. A document without which none of these princes had the right to take the throne at all. The legal basis of power. Also written in Arabic. The Khan's Yarlik. Let's explain the mechanism. The 13th to 15th centuries. A Russian prince could not legally ascend to the throne without this document. The Yarlik was an official permit to govern. It was a legal document issued personally by the Khan, recognizing a specific individual's right to a specific throne. Without a Yarlik, a person with their retinue and lineage was an impostor. With a Yarlik, they were a legitimate ruler. This was the state legal reality acknowledged by all participants in the system. They personally traveled to the hoard for the labels. They did not send envoys, they went themselves. They waited for months at the Khan's court. They brought lavish gifts. They conspired against brothers and nephews. They eliminated rivals even on the way to Sarai in order to intercept the document first. It was the most valuable state document in Russian medieval times, pricier than a will, pricier than any internal charter. Legally, it was worth more than all of them. It was written in Arabic, the label of Khan Toktamish, the labels of Khan Mingu Timur. They have been preserved, not in the archives of the Horde, which do not exist, but in the collections of Russian monasteries, because the Russians kept them, not as trophies of a defeated enemy, not as historical curiosities, but as active legal documents that were referenced in territorial and inheritance disputes long after a century or two following the death of the Khan who signed them. Find facsimiles in historical publications. Look at the language and structure of the document. In order to accept a document in a legal sense, to assert rights under it, successfully invoke it in a dispute, win a case based on its content, one must understand it. Not rely on a translator. It is about understanding it oneself. There is one more detail that historians usually do not discuss. The label was issued not just as a piece of paper, it was accompanied by an oral ceremony. The prince was personally present at the Khan's headquarters. Formulas were spoken, questions were asked, answers were given. All of this was in Arabic, the official language of the ordinal administrative proceedings. Translators were present, but the protocol assumed that the receiving party understood what was happening directly. This ritual was repeated from generation to generation. The princes of Moscow, Tver, and Ryazan traveled to Sarai in person for 150 years. Every time, the same ceremony. Every time, the same language. A century and a half of regular practice. If you have been regularly participating in a legal ceremony in a specific language for a century and a half, you know that language. Not perfectly, perhaps, but well enough to understand what is written in the document that protects your throne. Now, add another element. The charters were contested. It was a common practice for rival claimants to the throne to come to the Khan with different charters, or to challenge the authenticity of someone else's document. Disputes over whose charter was valid and whose was forged or outdated were settled at the Khan's court, in Arabic. To participate in such a dispute and win it, one must understand the subject matter. You need to be able to point out a specific line, a specific word in the document, and explain why it confirms your right. This is impossible with a translator. While the translator is translating your argument, the opponent is already providing the next counter-argument. A legal dispute requires direct involvement in the language. Russian princes engaged in such disputes. They won, and they lost, and they went back to argue again. This is not an abstract, understood the language. It is an active command of legal Arabic at the level of court representation. In medieval diplomacy, a document that the receiving party does not read themselves is legally vulnerable. Any opponent in a dispute could say, "Your translator conveyed it incorrectly. It says something else." This was a standard tactic used universally. The only defense against it is when both parties read the original directly. Then, the translator made a mistake doesn't hold. Labels functioned as unquestionable legal documents for centuries. They were disputed in terms of content, yet were not dismissed as incomprehensible papers in a foreign language. So, you've read it, directly. Historians usually say that at every court there was a staff of translators specifically trained to work with Mongol documents. All right, let's assume that's the case. Then explain the following. The charters were kept in Rus for another 200 years after the horde ceased to exist as a political power. After the last khanate capable of issuing new charters was destroyed, they were not thrown away. They were not symbolically destroyed as signs of dependence. They were carefully preserved in the monastery treasuries, and they were retrieved in the 16th century when territorial and inheritance disputes arose. Think of this from the perspective of an archivist's logic. Monastic archives from the 14th to 16th centuries are not spontaneous collections. They preserved what was valuable: liturgical books, land grants, charitable donations, documents confirming the monastery's rights to specific land or income. To keep a document for 200 years means that during those 200 years, it remained useful. It was retrieved. It was read. It was referenced. Why keep a 200-year-old legal document in an incomprehensible language from a non-existent state? If it is unclear, it is legally void. It cannot be presented in a dispute. One cannot win a case based on it. But they presented, and they won. This means either the language was understood for another 200 years after the fall of the horde, or, more importantly, it was never perceived as foreign, as the language of enemies, conquerors, oppressors. It was a working language, understandable without a dictionary. Now let's step out of the archives. Coins, metal, labels, parchment, the items that are kept in storage. But there is a trace of the same system that you can only see from above. Let's zoom out. Because coins, labels, and armor are parts of a single pattern that can only be seen from a height. Coins with Arabic text are not a feature unique to Moscow. The same situation exists in the Crimean Khanate, in Kazan, in Astrakhan, and in Siberia. In all the states within the territory that European cartographers of the 16th and 17th centuries referred to as Tartary, there was a unified currency standard. One alphabet, one principle for the design of official documents. Take the coins of the Kazan Khanate from the 15th century. Take the coins of the Moscow Principality from the same period. Place them side by side. Compare the font, the characteristic of the letter engravings, the thickness of the lines, the angle of inclination. Compare the placement of the inscription on the coin's field, how the text is integrated into the circle, where it begins, where the break occurs. Compare the ornamental dividers between the words. They are not just similar. They are created in one calligraphy school, not under the influence of each other, because influence always brings variation. This is the product of a single standard passed through an educational system. Now calculate the geography. Moscow and Kazan are about 800 kilometers apart in a straight line. For the 15th century, that is a significant distance. Different climates, different landscapes, different economic systems. The monetary standard is one, not similar. One. Now let's ask it differently. How was such an identity possible at a distance of 800 kilometers in the 15th century? There is one mechanism that explains this identity without any theories: the master training system. If coin engravers were trained in one center and then dispersed to different cities, they carried with them a unified standard. One typeface, one system of dividers, one text layout. This is a common medieval practice. craft corporations, guild brotherhoods, monastic workshops, all of them operated through a system of knowledge transmission from master to apprentice within a unified school. An apprentice from Moscow and an apprentice from Kazan, if they trained under the same master, produced identical work. One question: where was the center of this school? The official history says Sarai, the capital of the horde. Perhaps. But then explain why, after Sarai was destroyed in 1395 by Timur's forces, the coin standard in the Russian lands did not change. Sarai is in ruins. The center of learning is destroyed. Yet the standard continues to be reproduced for another 100 years. This contradiction is not commonly discussed. Add other levels to the coins. Armor. In the previous video, we examined how the Taushirovka on Moscow, Kazan, and Persian items is done according to a single technological standard. The same depth of engraving, the same ornamental patterns, the same layout of text on the item. Incorporate a unified principle of architectural proportions in the same area. Coins. Legal document flow. One standard, one area, one time. Officially, this is explained as cultural exchange, trade connections, the common heritage of the Mongol Empire. It sounds reasonable. Now answer one question. Look at the coins of Moscow and Kazan from the mid-15th century. There is no Moscow version or Kazan version. There is one template, reproduced in two places with precision. The only difference is the name of the ruler. Everything else is identical. That's not how it works with influence. Influence creates similarity. This is precision. This happens when there is a common center for standardization, a shared school for training masters, a unified system of control. This is not an exchange between states. It is a single state with different administrative centers. The name of this state is found on the maps of Mercator, Ortelius, and Blau. Tartaria. Look at the timeline of destruction. The unified monetary standard begins to disintegrate over approximately 50 years, from the mid-15th to the early 16th century. It is precisely then that Tartaria, on European maps, begins to shrink eastward. It is at that moment when Ivan III adopts a new coat of arms and declares Moscow the Third Rome. At the same time, everywhere, across the entire range, too synchronous for an organic cultural process. Note how this compression appears on the maps. Tartary doesn't vanish in an instant. It gradually loses its western part, the territories that now belong to the Moscow state, and then to the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, slowly, decade by decade, as if layers are being removed from it, from west to east. And each removed layer is filled with new political entities bearing new symbols and new narratives about their origins. On maps from the mid-16th century, Tartary is still vast. It encompasses everything east of the Volga line. On maps from the early 17th century, it has already shrunk to only beyond the Urals. By the end of the 17th century, it exists only in the Far East. Parallel to this movement of borders, monetary standards are changing. Chronicles are being rewritten. Labels are no longer presented in courts. Master engravers are losing their skill. Everything in one direction. Everything at one pace. But if this was a single monetary standard of a unified state, how exactly was it dismantled? And can this be observed on the coins themselves? Yes, it can. You can see everything quite literally, letter by letter, coin by coin. Coins of the transitional period are direct evidence, not indirect, direct. The second half of the 15th century, Ivan III. We take a series of his coins in strict chronological order and look only at the reverse, at the Arabic text. Early releases, bilingual minting. Obverse, the Cyrillic name of the Grand Duke. Reverse, full Arabic text. Readable, elegant, professional. The letters are properly connected. Words are separated by ornamental dividers. Proportions are maintained. The master knows what he is carving. The next series follows the same principle, but the Arabic text becomes shorter. The formula is condensed. A few words instead of an expanded phrase. In the next series, the letters are Arabic in shape, but they stop forming readable, meaningful text. The structure is disrupted. The connections between the letters look strange. A person who knows Arabic would say, "This is an attempt to reproduce writing without understanding it." Numismatists referred to it with the precise term, degradation of the legend. The next series is an imitation, a set of characters that are formally similar to Arabic letters, but are not actually them. The shape of the writing without the content of the writing. Then, Arabic disappears completely. Only Cyrillic remains. Find this series of coins from Ivan III in chronological order in numismatic references. It is documented, described, and dated in academic publications. Observe how the text degrades specifically. Record in which decade the transition occurs from readable text to imitation. Now, let's look at what this says about the masters. The degradation of a legend is a phenomenon well known to numismatists around the world. It follows a familiar scenario. A new generation engraver receives an assignment to create a die based on a sample. He has an old coin or a drawing. He reproduces what he sees: the shape of the letters, the overall layout, the approximate length of the line. But he does not understand the language. He doesn't know where one word ends and another begins. He doesn't know the rules for combining letters based on their position. And in Arabic, this is a fundamental rule. The result? External similarity without structure. This is a diagnosis, specific and unequivocal. The school of knowledge transmission has been interrupted. The master who could correctly carve Arabic text has vanished. He either passed away, left, or, and here lies the question, was intentionally replaced by a young master with a different education. The next generation no longer reads. They only copy the form. Within one generation, imitation. Within two, complete disappearance. There is an analogy that helps to understand the scale of this phenomenon. Imagine that mathematics stopped being taught in Soviet schools. They didn't announce it. They just gradually stopped hiring new math teachers. The old ones retired, while the young ones had different educations, without math. After 20 years, a new generation can write numbers, but cannot add. After 40 years, they write numbers poorly, confusing 6 with 9. After 60 years, they draw something vaguely resembling numbers, but it has become mere doodles. This is exactly what happened with the Arabic text on the coins. And this did not happen on its own. Someone stopped hiring specialists with the necessary qualifications. Someone made this decision, quietly, without orders, through personnel policy. Historians explain this as a gradual liberation from Mongol influence, an organic cultural process. Then answer one question. Why does this organic process occur strictly synchronously with several other processes in the same decades? Firstly, chronicles are being rewritten. It is during this period that the official narrative of the Mongol-Tatar yoke is formulated as the concept of 200 years of subjugation. Note that there are almost no chronicles written during the yoke itself that describe it as a systemic oppression. The concept emerges in texts created later, when there was a need to explain the past. Second, archives are burning. Several major collections of monastic documents from the 15th century suffered significant losses during this period. Coincidence? Perhaps. But the number and chronology of these coincidences are rather inconvenient. Third, the state symbols change entirely. A new coat of arms, a new concept of legitimacy, a new lineage. Everything is formalized within one temporal window, 3 processes, simultaneously, everywhere. This is not a gradual liberation. It is a comprehensive program. It has a framework. The first step is to remove the common language from the coins, not with a decree stating, starting tomorrow, only Cyrillic. Such an order would leave a mark in the archives. It's a gradual replacement of artisans in each specific courtyard. One retires, another is hired with a different background. The next Arabist doesn't read, he only copies the form. After 20 years, the courtyard operates differently, unaware that something has changed. This is precisely why the degradation of the legend happens unevenly. In some cities, it happens earlier, in others, later. It's not a chronological boundary. It's a pinpoint replacement. The second step is to rewrite the chronicles, to label the unified state space as yoke, to refer to the rulers as conquerors, to call the provinces captured lands, to create a narrative of eternal war where there was once a single administrative entity. The third step is to erase the name. On maps, Tartaria begins to shrink precisely during these decades, gradually, slowly, in one direction. This is what a guided change of cultural code looks like. Subtle, without directives, without noise. Coins lie in the ground, in thousands of treasures, from Novgorod to the Volga, and wait. And these coins have another dimension. It's not about what is written. It's not about how it's written. It's about where they lie. And when you take a map of these treasures and overlay it on another map, the entire system becomes apparent at once. Take the map of silver coin treasures from the 13th to the 15th centuries in Russia. It is publicly available. It is published in academic numismatic journals, in materials from the State Historical Museum, and in regional local history collections. This is simply a map of locations. A treasure was found here, here, and here. No theories, just the results of actual excavations. Look closely at this map. Pay attention to the density of the dots. The treasures are not evenly distributed. There are areas of high concentration and zones where they are virtually absent. Areas of high concentration coincide with zones of intense trade. Trade routes, river arteries, market towns. These are the treasures of merchants who hid their savings, the treasures of warriors who hid their pay, the treasures of townspeople who hid their savings in moments of danger. This is a living economic map, a map of where the people who held this money lived. And all this money has Arabic text on it. Now take another map. European atlases of the 16th and 17th centuries. Mercator, Ortelius, Blau, Hondius. find on them the state that cartographers refer to as Tartaria, or Tartaria Magna, or simply Tartary. Different cartographers, one name, the same borders. Overlay one on top of the other. Look, the areas coincide. Where this state is marked on European maps, coins of a unified monetary standard with Arabic text are found in the ground. Where Tartaria ends on the maps, the numismatic picture changes. Different coins, different standards, different traditions. The boundary of the monetary area coincides with the border of the state on maps. But let's not just state the facts. Let's check how this boundary looks from the inside. Because if it was cultural influence, it should have spread gradually, diminishing in strength. The further from the source, the weaker the trace. That's how any influence works. Look at the numismatic treasures from the western side. Poland, Lithuania, Livonia. Those very European states that bordered Russian lands in the 15th century engaged in active trade, waged wars, and formed alliances, a constant contact over the centuries. If coins with Arabic texts were simply a convenient trading format accepted by all, they should have ended up in Polish and Lithuanian hoards. Merchants do not select coins based on the alphabet of the reverse. In Polish treasure troves from the 13th to 15th centuries, there are no coins with Arabic inscriptions. In Lithuanian ones, there are none. In Livonian treasure troves, there are none. The boundary is not blurred. It's not gradual. It's sharp. Here is a specific picture. The Tver treasure, coins with Arabic text. The Pskov one, the same coins. And in the treasure 200 kilometers to the west, already in the territory of what was then Livonia, other coins, German silver pfennig, Polish grosz. Not a single specimen with an Arabic reverse. This is not a trade border. In trade, coins flow across any boundary. That's how medieval markets operated. Anything could be brought in, and whatever was necessary could be taken back. Coins accumulated in hoards mixed together. Novgorod, German, Swedish, Eastern dirhams. But the bilingual coins of the Russian princes, no. They remain on this side, strictly. One mechanism explains such clarity, the state border. A coin issued by one state remains in the domestic circulation of that state. It is accepted internally because its nominal value is recognized there. Beyond its borders, it is merely silver by weight, like any foreign metal. It is not hoarded. It is not stored. It does not settle in caches. The area of bilingual coins with Arabic text is the territory of the state that issued them and where they circulated as legal tender. It matches with Mercator maps. This is not a theory. It is two open publications from different departments of the same library. A numismatic atlas and a historical atlas. No one has simply placed them side by side and compared them. There is a third map that should be added to this comparison. The map of armor distribution with Arab tawshir is the technique we discussed in the previous video. Its range of distribution coincides with the same two maps: Moscow, Kazan, Astrakhan, Istanbul, Tehran. The same territory, the same range. 3 maps, 1 territory. This is not a coincidence. 3 independent sources is already a pattern, a system. And this system had specific outlines. To the west, it was bordered by the European states, Poland, Lithuania, the Holy Roman Empire. To the east, by the ocean. To the north, by Arctic zones, unsuitable for state building. To the south, by Persia, China, India. The entire space between these borders is a unified monetary area, a single weapon tradition, a single legal language. It is precisely this space on the maps of Mercator and Ortelius that is labeled as Tartaria. One can argue about what exactly this state represented. Was it a centralized monarchy or a confederation? Was it a single ruling dynasty or a system of interconnected elites? These are valid questions to which we currently have no clear answers. But here is what has an answer. The coins lie in the ground. The labels were kept in the archives. The masters worked in the same school. The degradation occurred simultaneously with the political reform. These are facts, not interpretation. They can be interpreted in various ways. Official historiography interprets them as cultural influence and trade connections. We look at the same facts and see signs of a unified state space. It's up to you to decide who is right. You just need to take a numismatic catalog, a treasure map, and a Mercator map. Place them side by side and look. They just haven't been placed nearby by anyone until now. Now, the final nail. The official version states there was Rus and there was the Horde, two states at war, two nations, two cultures, two worlds. This is not a picture of two states at war. Warring states do not share the language of official document circulation. They do not use the same religious formulas on state regalia. They do not keep legal documents of a former adversary for 200 years. The first act of a new power is to break the symbolism of the previous one, to remint coins, to remove everything foreign. Here, 100 years after the victory, they continue to do the same things they did during the game. The same coins, the same system, the same language, the same masters. So it was something else. They were not enemies. They were administrative units of one system with different rulers. And when the power in the center changed, it was not liberation from invaders. It was a change of administrative leadership, an internal matter, which was later rewritten as a war. Because a war among one's own is a narrative, and the narrative governs people. The name of the system is Tartaria. Her coins lie in the ground throughout the entire range. Her documents are in the monastery archives. Her technologies are in the metal of the armor of the armory. Now put everything together and consider what the official history had to adopt for the yoke version to work. The yoke version demands acceptance of the following. For 150 years, the main currency of the country was written in a language that no one understood, and there were no court cases, no birch bark letters with complaints. That the victor over the Horde continued to mint coins in the language of the defeated even 100 years after the victory, simply out of inertia. That the legal foundations of state power were formalized in an incomprehensible language, and yet functioned as indisputable legal acts. That the labels of a non-existent state were kept for 200 years and presented in legal disputes, and won them. This very system continued to operate at the level of the personal armor of kings for another 200 years after the official liberation. Each of these statements, individually, with some stretching, can be neatly summed up with a convenient word: tradition, inertia, pragmatism, coincidence. But when they stand next to each other all at once, the version shatters into pieces. Tradition does not synchronize itself with political decisions. Inertia does not operate synchronously from Moscow to Crimea. Trade pragmatism does not explain religious formulas on state regalia. Chance does not repeat itself for 250 years. There is only one option left. It was a single language of one state, a unified document flow, a singular legal system, a unified school of masters from Novgorod to Samarkand, which was then erased step by step according to a plan through the replacement of masters, the rewriting of chronicles, the destruction of archives, and the change of symbolism, leaving no visible seam, substituting the narrative of an eternal war between those who were actually parts of one whole. Signage in museums can be rewritten in a day. A chronicle can be edited over a few years. A map can be redrawn in a decade. But metal does not lie. Thousands of treasures, across the territory of the former state, from Novgorod to the Volga, from Ryazan to Nizhny Novgorod. Each treasure is a silent witness. Silent because no one has asked it the right question, so far. And here is the question that follows from this. If the entire state infrastructure functioned in Arabic, what does this say about who comprised the educated elite in that state? Who worked in the office, managed paperwork, and serviced the treasury? These were not people who knew Arabic as a foreign language. They were individuals for whom Arabic was the working language of administration, the language in which they thought about state affairs. Now ask, where did these people disappear from? In which generation? By whose decision? There is no answer, because in official historiography, these people never existed. We started with one coin, with one flipped side of one display case in one hall. From this grew a chain: masters, mints, 7 cities, labels, armor, maps. A chain that stretches from the 14th century to the 17th and encompasses territory from Novgorod to Samarkand. All of this comes from a single action: to flip a coin. It lies in thousands of treasures across Russia. It rests in museum showcases, faces up. The metal doesn't burn in monastery fires. It doesn't crumble from editing. It doesn't change with new textbooks. The only right question is, what is written on the back?